views and opinions expressed in this program are those of the participants and do not necessarily reflect the views of BronxNet or the program underwriters.
Hello everyone, welcome to Open BxRx Remote, brought to you from my living workspace, Charlie Executive Suite. I'm Rhina Valentin, your host of Café con Leche every Friday. And today we're taking a look at some of the most memorable interviews of 2020. This year has been a whirlwind for everyone, and just weeks into the new year, we were all faced with a global pandemic. We witnessed the killing of George Floyd that sparked protests across the country. And we also had the 2020 presidential election that resulted in our first Black and first South Asian vice president-elect. We have a lot to look back on. So sit back y prepárate. All this and more is headed your way because now we are officially open. Welcome to Open. I'm Rhina Valentin, your host of Café con Leche for the next hour. Always inviting you to get social with us online, tweet us, and follow us on Instagram at BronxNet TV, and like us on Facebook at Open BronxNet Television. And of course, while you're there, follow moi on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, Insta Stories, and LinkedIn at Rhina Valentin. Well, 2020 started off smoothly for most people. It quickly took a turn in March when the World Health Organization declared we have a global pandemic crisis. COVID-19 took the entire world by storm as people were faced with many challenges, massive loss of lives, jobs, not being able to pay rent, and many families needing food. It was important for all of us to work together. So let's take a look at some of the humanitarian work we presented here on Open.
Let's just start with sharing with everyone the actual City Meals on Wheels having one of the biggest distribution square feet centers in the Bronx. And share with us the massive volume you've been dealing with in the past couple of weeks.
Sure. So City Meals is always providing weekend, holiday, and emergency meals to homebound elderly New Yorkers. We're typically delivering to 18,000 people in all 5 boroughs, about 2 million meals a year. About 500,000 of those meals typically come from our emergency meal distribution center right in Hunts Point in the Bronx. To put some framework around what we're doing now, we have delivered 150,000 meals and are in the process of packing and preparing to deliver 300,000 more in the coming weeks, all emergency meals coming from the emergency meal distribution center. So in just a month or so in total, we will have done almost what we did all of last year in emergency meals.
In a matter of how many weeks?
Well, we started 2 weeks ago, and I assume it will, we'll be going for the next few weeks, obviously. And as long as we need to get food to older New Yorkers who are in need right now.
So where's the food coming from?
Sure. We, literally all over the country. From the warehouse, we're doing shelf-stable meals. So it's food that people can have on hand. There are still meal deliveries going out with fresh meals from meal centers around the city. They're purchasing, procuring, buying, trying to cook. And as long as that happens, those will be several meals a week. And then these shelf-stable meals to fill in the whole, making sure there's food every day of the week for these people.
So how is this distribution occurring? Is it a daily distribution, a weekly distribution? How is that occurring?
It's typically daily. We've moved to less frequently, but more meals at a time because our roles are increasing. We, as I had said, we feed 18,000 people normally, but there are now an additional 22,000 older New Yorkers who usually get their lunches, sometimes breakfast and lunch, at a senior center throughout the city. Those people don't have that option anymore. So we're adding them to getting emergency meals as well. We have volunteers and staff deliverers all over the city. There's a dire need for volunteers. Last week, in total, for the last week or two, we had over 400. We'll probably have another 250 volunteers just this week alone, helping us get food where it's needed.
Hunger is an epidemic within New York to begin with. And so now it's probably quadrupled. I don't know what those numbers are. I'm very curious to know. Please do share what the difference is now.
Sure. So let me start with, we serve in the Bronx, and we've been there for a number of years. And on a typical year prior to this, we were serving about 750,000 meals in the Bronx. And we were on par this year to serve almost 1 million meals. So it is, we know the need was there. That is one of our fastest rising sites. The numbers keep growing in the Bronx. And when this virus hit, we immediately thought about the needs of our staff, as you mentioned, to stay safe, our ability to keep on functioning, which meant that our staff did stay safe so that we could keep on serving people and we didn't have to close due to any kind of illness. So we made a lot of changes in our model, which meant people not coming inside our facility. We serve from the street. Our staff is protected. We used to have choice. Choice was a big piece of what we did so that clients could come and choose food with dignity, the food that they want. They could pick a brown rice, a white rice, a pasta as a grain. They could pick a vegetable. We had to give up on that model just in terms of time and staffing. So what we did for our staff is our staff went to a staggered schedule. We work every other day, so we're not all exposed. So if someone gets sick, we're not going to close the whole facility. We're just going to have to close that day and we can keep serving. The other thing that we quickly saw was that people were scared to come out. We're in New York City, in the Bronx, in the epicenter of the virus. People are coming out, they're on the streets, they're exposed. It's not like the cars at food banks that we see. It's people in their carts walking the streets, maybe having to take the subway to get to us. So we knew that was going to be a major problem, that people were going to be hungry and not being able to get food. And so we partnered quickly with a number of home delivery services, Corona Couriers. We're working with Banana Kelly, who are letting us know of people who are in their homes and who cannot get out and who have issues. And so we're delivering food to them. And that we hadn't done before.
Yeah, that's a big deal. That's a big
deal. Yeah, so that's a huge deal. We're working with Montefiore Hospital for their patients who they're at home. They're not in the hospital, but they're telehealth patients. They're reaching their patients through telehealth. They're assessing them for food insecurity. The residents themselves are coming and picking up the boxes of food, and we are bringing them to them.
New York City is so big, and if the small hospitals are running out now, the New York hospitals are going to be in big trouble. And so we were like, I think we should start doing this. And we had contacted the government first, and then we had contacted, some hospitals. And at first everyone was like, oh no, we're fine. We don't need anything. And then within a day, it was like an overwhelming request from especially from individuals, because those individuals were not getting masks directly from the hospitals or the government. So people like doctors or nurses or essential workers were just having such a hard time, and they were coming directly to us.
And Karen, I understand that you one of your trials was based on bridal bags. Is that correct?
Yes, because we're looking to see what fabric can be used that are medical grade to create these masks. And Caroline did the research, and she said, Karen, I think if you have your garment bags, we can use your garment bags.
Can you show it to us? You have one there, right?
Yes. Yeah.
So that's what you started with.
That was my sample, yeah, right. That I started, like creating the pattern and everything. So I said, okay, I actually just received a big order last week for garment bags, and I had like over like 500 garment bags in my garage, and then I just started cutting them up, and that's how we started creating the masks.
And so now, but now the way you guys are designing is with professional medical materials, right? Caroline, you want to elaborate a little further? Because I know you were showing me a sample of where you're at now with the designs and who you're designing for, because you're designing for the medical professionals. So it has to have a certain level of protection, not
Yeah.
just look fabulous.
Yes. So actually, so this is I don't know if you guys can see, but this is basically what we're this is some of what we're making. We're all using different colors, various colors, and some of the masks are cotton, which also offers protection. But the best material we've found so far to use that offers the most protection, and the material that actual medical masks are made out of, is this material called polypropylene. And so before this, I was kind of surprised that more people hadn't really researched this and figured it out, because it's a very accessible material. Like, you guys probably have it at home. It's used for reusable bags that maybe they used to give us with purchase or at the grocery store. And so there's all of these different things that it's used for, because it's such a common material. And so when we were doing this, I had ordered some from Amazon that were actually used as, I think they were used for like cleaning pads, but it was the same material. It was actually this yellow material.
Right.
And then Karen had her garment bags, and I emailed her garment bag supplier, and I was like, hey, can you give us the exact content of the material? And it was exactly the same material. So the only difference in what we're doing and medical masks is that we're using a slightly heavier weight. Right. So which makes it reusable. It makes it washable and you can clean it, whereas medical masks are normally made to be cheap and disposable.
Right.
So it's actually offering from what I understand, it's actually offering the same amount of protection, and the feedback we've gotten from doctors and nurses and essential workers who have worn it has been really great. We are talking with some hospitals to try out new materials, but yeah, it's been working out great for us.
Share how you've been able to expand this into a national network. So tell me how that system works, because you have people from different parts of the United States that are part of your movement now.
So when Karen and I started, it was just the two of us. And then we got one person, I think within like 2 or 3 days, that was a good friend of us. And basically all of the volunteers we've gotten just ourselves, and we've gotten them through word of mouth. We've gotten them through our alumni network. We've gotten them through people that have worked with us or people we know in the fashion industry, and basically just also social media, just putting it out there. So many people are just sitting at home right now and they want to help so badly, and they don't have a place to go, and they have the same skills we do. And so we're happy we're able to create this this community for people to come to and really help from all over.
It's amazing what can happen when we put our heads together. So here on Open BxRx Friday, we had the opportunity to speak with politicians about the issues surrounding COVID-19. We discussed topics such as letting our kids go to school and the effects the pandemic had on the restaurant industry. Let's take a look.
This is all new to us. We're all working remotely. Thank God for computers at this particular time. And thank you for taking the time to be with us. I think it's important that the community hear from you and how your office is addressing this matter.
Well, we've been, I'm here in the office, and we've been working with the essential staff and directors and my communications team. And basically what our job at this moment is to advocate, to have conversations, to get information from the state and the city governments, as well as the federal government, and coordinate that for our borough, and sort of just to manage the flow of information, and try the best that we can to have Bronxites be informed, Bronxites to work cooperatively, and to make sure that we have the best opportunity here to minimize the amount of exposure, the amount of sickness, and unfortunately the amount of deaths that are going to happen. Now, with that said, I want to explain to Bronxites why we are at this place. And so, again, with the most information that we have, the more we can minimize fears and misinformation and hysteria.
The Bronx has been one of the hardest hit areas in New York City in terms of COVID-19. And particularly early on in this pandemic, late March, they were asking for health professionals that were either retired or no longer working to jump back in. And for me, this was the opportunity to, do my part, put in my little grain of salt in a way that it was different and that I felt really touched the lives of the people in my community. And that's by going back to my first career as a nurse.
And so you are still on duty. And when did you decide to jump back in?
Late March. I want to say my first shift was March 27th or 28th. I can't remember exactly, but it was that weekend that I went and started working my shifts again.
And so are we now? How's it looking in the hospital?
Definitely better. This past weekend, they didn't need me all weekend, which was a good relief to hear that they had enough staff. And that is a very good sign for the Bronx and for our hospitals. Unfortunately, like you did mention, the healthcare disparities are still prevalent. And that's something that we have been contending with for many, many years. And I think that this current pandemic has really brought to light what we in the Bronx have been sounding the alarm about for a very long time, that our health is not equitable. There's no equity in our healthcare, and our disparities are huge, and that we need to look at how we address health outcomes in the Bronx in a very different and unique way, particularly after this pandemic.
I mean, it's an alarming death toll when you hear that 39% of Latinos and 28% of African Americans and Black have died due to COVID. We know that we make up together the largest group population-wise, but we also know that we've been the most disadvantaged when it comes to having access. So while we are alarmed by the statistics and really the deaths in our community have taken people from us that matter so much, people that are loved ones. I mean, I can't tell you how many parents of people that I went to school with, I see every single day are passing away. We're not shocked by the fact that our community has been disproportionately left behind once again in this crisis. We don't have access, right? I feel like the lack of access and the instability of, for example, the economics of our communities and the housing situation in our communities has really led to this crisis being amplified with the Latinos and the African Americans.
I know you represent the Bronx and Manhattan. However, it's horrendous because there were issues with NYCHA prior to this. I can only imagine how the people are dealing and coping with these current circumstances. I mean, the buildings themselves were struggling with keeping gas on, and now, the cleanliness. It's just, I can't even imagine.
I know, my hair stand, because they were already suffering from so many health related issues. We had mold, we had lead, no heat, sometimes no hot water, and it's NYCHA's become a public health nightmare. And the people that live there, thankfully they're so resilient, and they have coalesced around this pandemic and really try to rescue themselves, right? Because government wasn't coming, to help them. And so, I happen to represent the district with the highest number of public housing stock of any other council member in the city. And it's been really overwhelming. But at the same time, it's not something that is surprising, right? It shouldn't surprise any of us, because we've been saying, this all along. You have, so many people, you have so much density in a community. And that density of, there's density everywhere, but when we talk about the millions of people that are living in overcrowded situations already, that are immune compromised already, something like this was just a disaster in waiting, right? And so I hope that at least we walk away from this with some lessons learned on how to, I think one of the things that really pissed me off, and I'll use that word "pissed me off" because it's the accurate, description of how I felt, is that, there was no one coming to really speak to families, low-income families, families that were oversaturated, families that were really overwhelmed about the possibility that they may be impacted, right? And to really guide them through the best practices that will help keep them and their families safe. We were the last, right, in the totem pole. And so, I get that the priority went to hospitals and all of that because that was necessary, but nobody came to rescue us. And that was really devastating.
What kind of influence does the United Federation of Teachers have on the reopening of the schools this semester, this fall?
We've been doing more of the work. We've been doing this work since probably the second week of April. Our own staff started figuring out if we were going to do social distancing inside of the schools, what would that look like? By the end of April, we had already come to the conclusion that the only way if we could open schools safely, the only way to do it would be what is now being called a blended learning model. We were calling it a hybrid back then. And at that moment, we want to put it in context. We were at the height of the pandemic here in New York City. And
right.
Hopefully we don't have to go through that again. And that's really what we're basing all of our decisions on. But we had a lot to do with closing the schools. The mayor didn't want to do that. We had to go public in a major ugly fight to get the schools closed. But we're not, I want to be clear to everyone, we're not ready to open yet.
We're not.
We are not ready to open yet. We have a long way to go, and there's a lot of things that we can control, but there's a lot of things that are not in our control. So this is a steep hill we're trying to climb at this moment.
I run the New York City Hospitality Alliance, was a big advocate for outdoor dining, and it's been incredibly important in transforming the city streetscape, frankly, and also providing a lifeline to many of these small businesses and jobs. But only about 40% of restaurants in the 5 boroughs are participating in outdoor dining. And as it gets cold, you have the outdoor heating issue, which costs money. And even with heating, are people going to want to sit out in the cold? So while it's an important policy, very, very important, it's going to be made permanent, we hope, it's not going to save the restaurant industry. We really need the federal government to act. And the House of Representatives just passed a new HEROES Act, which includes something called the Restaurants Act, which is a $120 billion grant fund that would give these cash injections to restaurants to afford rent, utilities, payroll, vendors, and all these expenses that they have piling up that they need in order to survive. Because these aren't big businesses with cash reserves. These are like everyday New Yorkers. Many of them are using their personal savings to try to keep their restaurants open and keep some New Yorkers employed. So without passing that, we're going to see an even more dire situation of businesses closing.
We have to take a quick break, but when we return, we'll discuss some of our health and wellness segments on the best of Open BxRx 2020. Hey everyone, welcome back to the best of Open 2020. And so while COVID-19 has left a lot of people worried about their physical and mental health, we had the opportunity to speak with doctors and discuss Ayurveda, meditation. And we even talked about a new diagnosis called maskne. Let's take a look.
Yeah, let's talk a little bit about Ayurveda, right?
Yeah.
Ayurveda. Okay, so first of all, how does one even decide to get into Ayurveda and yoga therapy? Like the name itself isn't as common as the other, Hatha yoga. Why Ayurveda?
So Ayurveda is 2 words, Ayur, which means life, and Veda, which means science. And Ayurveda and yoga all come from the Vedas, which are these really old texts that we have that came from India. And they're about 5,000 years old. That's when the first things were started to be written down. But it's believed that these sciences were taught orally for thousands of years prior to that. So it's really ancient wisdom. And even though it's rooted in India, it's really common for all of us. It's a living science. So it's not confined to any culture or geography.
So when we reference this wisdom is based on the relationship to mind, body, and soul. It's Eastern medicine, right? And so based on our current situation, how does one apply this to themselves?
So Ayurveda, there's so many ways. I'm trying not to get tongue twisted, but its magic is in prevention, and so it gives us rules or guidelines of how to get our daily rhythms, our activities more in line with nature. So our circadian rhythm is definitely connected to the rhythms of the sun and the moon and the seasons, and it helps us to recognize what those are and then live more according to them. And it's based on individuals. So if two individuals came in and they both had the COVID case, there are definitely things that we would do across the board to help treat that. But there also would be differences from individual to individual. And that's another sort of magic point of Ayurveda, is that we're really looking at each person as an individual, like microcosm, rather than treating blank symptoms.
This is kind of the worst fear that everyone has is happening now. And so much of what our programs are about on our app or what we talk about in our books is how to reduce, actually get some benefit out of what the fear that's actually coming up. So let me give you an example of what I mean. We have been pretty much operating from what I call conditional living, right? Things have to be just so in order for me to feel calm and good. But if they're not so, my whole world gets rocked, right? And that's really what's happening right now. So the key is to get to unconditional living, which you can only get from yourself. So in other words, it doesn't matter what's happening around us, we still remain the center of our own peace. And that's the core of all of our programs in the app or book or whatever, the videos, whatever we have, is for you, whether you're a stage 4 cancer patient or a caregiver that's stressed out or worried, that you're going to get the coronavirus, that you stay centered and grounded, and you may have moments of fear, but you keep coming back to you being the solid foundation of groundedness and centeredness.
It is a very, very difficult time. A lot of people are experiencing loss. For those who don't live with anyone, who live alone, they are feeling more isolated. There are different levels of social determinants that really exasperate what the sheltering in place is doing to one's emotional health and physical health. What we do encourage is that you do reach out for help with some support within the community that you live in or with family members. You can create Zoom meetings, you can create Google meetups, FaceTime meetups as a way of sort of interacting with others. You can also take walks in the parks. The parks are now beginning to open up a little bit. It's important, of course, to wear your mask, wear gloves, and continue to utilize the sanitation, the sanitizing that we encourage. But it's important to get out. It's a beautiful day outside, to get some air, get some vitamin D, walk, even if you're by yourself. When you're at home, maybe play music, decide to use a recipe. We have to become a little bit creative in order to break up the monotony, because our lives have really changed. We don't have the same options of going out into the community, taking the train, traveling to different places in the city. So we really have to use what we have to uplift ourselves. Spiritual music, if you are spiritual, you should continue to connect with your church or whatever religious organization you're with. These are just some tips in how to manage your feelings of isolation or anxiety or depression.
This is interesting. The term itself, masni, is this a newfound term?
So it actually is. Think about it like this. You have a mask and you have acne. You add them together and you get maskne. It's pretty, straightforward.
Yeah, I kind of figured it was that. It's just interesting because now it's like something else we have to concern ourselves with. So just tell us a little bit about what you feel is causing the masni.
Right. So, a lot of the times people have different masks, and it depends on how you're treating your skin how you are, preparing your skin before you put the mask on, what kind of mask you're wearing, and also if you're wearing makeup under the mask. So, some tips that I like to tell my patients are to always wear a cotton mask, something like this, that you can actually wash every day. And it's really important to wash it every day because, you have a lot of oil, dead skin cells, and dirt that remain on the mask, and you want to get rid of that because you don't want to clog your pores. A lot of the times those surgical masks, the blue ones, they are great. They are, wonderful to wear to help the spread of COVID, but they are very irritating to the skin. So I always say cotton is better.
Those segments were all so beneficial. We do have to take a quick break, but when we return, we'll get back to the best of Open BxRx 2020. Don't go anywhere. Hey everyone, welcome back. As the arts, culture, and entertainment theme show of Open, it was very important for us to highlight the arts organizations and artists during the pandemic. Like everyone else, they were forced to present the arts virtually. Now, more than ever, creatives kept creating, and creative art content was shared with us throughout our restricted quarantine orders. Let's take a look at some of those artistic, memorable interviews.
With the hard realities for the artist and for us, we decided that we still have to keep celebrating. And that's why we began Be Unidos, or Be United, this online campaign.
And so Be Unidos, all right, so I like looking at the flip side of this, this pause, as we're calling it. What's happened now is, while yes, you may have been dancing physically on stage, right now you're connecting technically with people from all over the world.
Right. Well, the beauty of it is that we're still dancing physically. So every day of the week in this Be Unidos campaign is a video series that allows everyone to engage either with a work that we've done. So we have watch parties. Every Wednesday we have a watch party, or we have Motivational Mondays. We have Ballet Hispanico guests come in and give a motivational quote for everyone. Take Back Tuesdays is when you can take a class. And so we have our artists and our teachers teaching classes. Huepa Wednesdays is our watch parties. So
Huepa Wednesdays, what are the watch parties?
So the watch parties are our work. So we have, we show last week, we showed Con Brazos Abiertos, which is Michelle Manzanales's piece. And then afterwards, we have conversations and cocktails. So I have a conversation with the choreographer immediately following, so people can ask questions and they can get into the work a little bit more. And then after Wednesdays, we have Therapeutic Thursdays, which we give things like Pilates, yoga, ways of keeping your body in tone. And then my favorite, really, although I love Huepa Wednesdays, are Flashback Fridays, which it gives you a sense of the 50-year history with pictures and discussions. It's a lot of fun.
So when the lockdown happened, Lincoln Center started talking to all of our colleagues and all of our friends at different cultural institutions. And we were able to get in touch and connect with our colleagues both at Works in Process and at the Guggenheim. And this was a series that was originally supposed to happen in person with an audience and at the Guggenheim. And we believe that eventually all of these 4 pieces, I think there's actually more, but what we're premiering are 4 pieces of Works in Process. And those will all eventually have an audience, be performed live, but until that moment, they are available at Lincoln Center at home. What happened was that we've been figuring out very creative ways for artists to get together, to be safe. Being safe in this moment is really important. And so what you might see is, I don't know, sometimes I watch movies from the time before COVID and I'm like, they're not wearing masks. Oh no.
I know, isn't that amazing how we've been reconditioned already?
And so you will see in these films, all 4 of them, the artists are not wearing masks, but there is a reason for that. They actually created a bubble, and they were in residence upstate at Katzbahn, which they actually had to get tested multiple times before they made a bubble. They joined the bubble, and then they came immediately from their residency to Lincoln Center, were able to perform, and that when they actually ended up finishing performing, their bubble had popped. And so that was how we were able to get these pieces in a safety zone for in this time of COVID. But you see the joy, you see their faces, you see their energy. And all of these pieces, I think what's great about them is that they're really connecting to representing all of New York City. And that's what's so important right now, is that the arts are connected to everyone. It's not just a few, it is everyone has a connection to art in their life.
Everything is just turned into this remote virtual experience that it's quite refreshing to know, while of course you're still being safe, that people can actually get up close and experience the images.
Exactly. Yeah, I mean, the Zoom stuff is a necessary thing that we have to do, but we've always done a good part of this show outdoors. And this year we just expanded it and made the entire thing outdoors. So all of the photos are up on these huge banners all over the neighborhood. And then at night we're doing projections here in our backyard. So, and on some of the buildings around us. So we've really expanded. We've also, this year we've moved up into a NYCHA, into public housing, and we put some of the photos up in the playgrounds up there, which the families have really loved.
So let's talk about this mapping that you've done with the images and how you even chose these locations and what that looks like for somebody who's walking through the neighborhood, and give us streets as well.
Sure. Well, I think if you come off the subway at the hub at 149th and 3rd Avenue there, if you walk up Melrose, you'll see them. They're all along the fence next to Immaculate Conception Church. And there's a big project there from Colombia. Beautiful, beautiful black and white photos. Then as you turn the corner and come up 151st Street, there is a great project there from Argentina and another one from Mexico, Los Payasos. It's a beautiful, beautiful, really gorgeous large format portraits. They're huge. They're about 5 or 6 feet high. And then we've got a community garden across the street that has a wonderful project from Guerrero, from Mexico. And it's a long-term black and white project that's done in a farming community up in the mountains. Gorgeous, just incredible photos, very inspirational. And
I'm excited.
yeah, you've got to see it. It's really great. And the community garden is open all day, so people can come and sit in the garden and eat lunch, walk around, do whatever they want. It's wonderful.
During this COVID, I was very scared. There was a lot of thinking going in my head. Gladly, I did not lose my job and I'm working from home. But then nighttime would come and I'm still here in a room where I've been working all day. So I decided I needed to do something so that my mind is not thinking of anything else. You know, I have PTSD, I'm bipolar, and I'm a very, very happy person and very creative. So I decided that why not start a line that expresses my love for Puerto Rico, you know, because I do love my island. I create a lot of projects, but this is the first time that I decided to just go, and I'm making one-of-a-kind pieces, just one of each piece. And it's just inspired by my imagination. And I stop thinking about COVID and I just get myself out there and make believe that I'm in the island. And I think of my roots and I think of my parents who are still there. And that just, I create some masterpieces that sometimes I even impress myself. I would love to meet them all.
Not even the pandemic can stop artistry. If anything, it fed our creativity. Lovely. We have to take a quick break, but we'll be back with the best of Open BxRx 2020. Hey everyone, and welcome back to the best of Open BxRx 2020. This year, not only did we deal with a pandemic and a struggling economy, but we were also faced with the killings of Breonna Taylor, Ahmaud Arbery, and George Floyd. These killings sparked a protest around the country and reignited the ongoing issues of racism in America. Let's take a look at some of those interviews along with a performance focusing on Black Lives Matters and the protests.
Last night was the first night since I heard about the death of George Floyd that I actually got 5 hours of sleep. So it's been a whirlwind. I've been in Minneapolis. After I saw how the NYPD was treating my people at home, I flew back to New York. It's been nonstop since I've heard about his death.
So let's talk a little bit about the protests, the curfews, and and then the riot component of it, because there's a lot of mixed energy, a lot of mixed information. There's a lot of confusion going on right now.
Yes. And it's no clarity. And I think what people need to remember, that this is more than a protest. This is an absolute revolution. Black people in this country have been oppressed for 400 years, and watching the murder of George Floyd on television was the last straw. It was enough is enough. And as you can see by the uprisings around the whole nation, people want real change. People want something tangible, and everyone's grown tired of waiting for career politicians to come and save us. So now we're taking the steps to save ourselves.
Fast forwarding to 2020, right? Which has been a whirlwind of a year. At the top of the year, you've been out there protesting. And what I'd like to open up with is just your experience as a protester before a photographer. What's that been like for you?
It's been very emotional. It's been super emotional. I've been to a lot of other protests before, but this one was so different because there's such a sense of unity and change that people want, you know, and it's definitely been super emotional because on top of like everything that's happening, we're also going through a pandemic, so it's been a very weird time, you know. So it's been very emotional and very powerful. Like I'm a different person after going to those protests, for sure.
I would imagine so. And as we go through some of your images, I just want to point out one of the things that just popped out for me, it stood out, is I noticed that in a lot of your images, you have the bridge as a background in some form of or another. And I want to say I saw it in at least 5 different images, 5 different scenes, 5 different scenarios. So I don't even know how many protests you've attended, but first share how many protests you've attended, and then share if you, because you express yourself through photography, if you subconsciously are hoping and wishing for some kind of bridging to happen between the police and society within this protest. So, I don't know. That's just what stood out for me in observing your images.
Well, I went to 5 days of protests in a row. So every protest was different. And when I took the photos of the bridges, that was on the second day that I went of protest. And we actually walked from Harlem. So that day I walked 6 miles alongside of thousands of people. And we ended up at City Hall, and the cops were blocking us from crossing the Brooklyn Bridge. And then, you know, they split us up. We were all in groups. And then they said, oh, let's go to the FDR. Let's take over the FDR. And I was super exhausted at that point. But I definitely wanted to capture that because it was such a historical moment, you know. And just to see how many people were in solidarity. And it was just a very beautiful, like, human moment. And it definitely was meaningful to me, the fact that we were in between those 2 bridges, because we were between the Brooklyn Bridge and the Manhattan Bridge. So it was a very powerful moment. Like, I couldn't even believe that I was, you know, there. You know, we blocked off that FDR for over an hour.
The song that you're going to perform for us kind of sums up pretty much where we are right now in society.
Absolutely. So I wrote this piece about 4 years ago, and it was a collective of things that was happening at the time that made me write it. I was marching. I was seeing firsthand, you know, the families of people who were murdered by police brutality, such as Eric Gardner. It took me 9 hours. I wrote this piece, 9 hours. It took me to write this piece, with a lot of just watching videos of Emmett Till, watching over and over what happened to Eric Gardner. And actually the line where I say, get the dogs, the colors is coming. My late mother, we were talking one time before she passed, and she said, you know, she grew up down south in South Carolina, and she said, when I would cross the property of the mailman to go to school, the kids would yell, get the dogs, the coloreds are coming. And so That's really how that piece They Run came about. And I think it's really unfortunate that I can update that with names such as Breonna Taylor and George Floyd.
Yeah, it is unfortunate. Are you ready to present it?
Yes, I am.
All right. All right, mi gente, here to perform. They Run. Let's give it up for Artist Up.
America. Depending on how you spell it, ICA or KKK makes all the difference to the end of your day. America, where babies are assassinated for buying Skittles and iced tea, yet their murderers get to walk scot-free. America, where there's a Nipsey in every hood near you, yet they don't get supported because the media has to tell you who's who. America, I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all, except George Floyd, Breonna Taylor, Eric Gardner, Amadou Diallo, Tamir Rice, Sandra Bland, and Junior Black. Get the dogs, the coloreds are coming. They run. Hey, these parts you don't belong around, boy. They run. Hey, that water you drinking ain't for colored folk. They run. The fire burns from Emmett Lewis Till to Philando Castile. The pain, even I feel, is real. Unfortunately, 1985 wasn't year enough to stop the blood of my ancestors' overspill. So 30 years later, I run. But not from the dogs, or crossing the white folk property, or drinking from the fountain labeled whites only. I run for my unborn's possibility. I run for the youth I teach. I run for my niece, who I know I've already reached. I'm humbled by modern day kings like my son Lennon, who march making it clear: no justice, no peace, no racist police. And modern day queens like Shaniqua Charles, who remind us on the daily that we don't have nothing to lose but our chains. You see, your permission doesn't need to be given. I run to rid myself of misguided traditions. No more sitting around the table under the pretenses that thanks was given. No more leaving cookies and milk for old Saint Nick, because the exchange of priceless gifts for 7 days is what I'm with. I ran right into my consciousness with every experience, leaving me a tighter grip. Ashe.
All right, we have to take a quick break, but we'll be back with more of the best of Open BxRx 2020. Hello, everyone. Welcome back to the Best of Open BxRx 2020. You know, this year was also an election year, and it was very important for all of us to get out and vote. I had the opportunity to interview some of the members of Why Vote, an organization pushing young people to make a difference at the polls. Let's take a look.
The founding of Why Vote really goes back to the 2016 election, which was a wake-up call for many of us. And in the wake of trying to figure out what had and hadn't happened in that election, we went into deep analysis, data analysis, and discovered the rates of youth voting, which many of your viewers may know are not where we want them to be or anywhere close. And so in 2016, even before we had the results of the 2016 turnout, I was looking at the voter turnout from the 2014 midterms, and in which just 14% of 18 and 19-year-olds voted. And when you have something where 86% of young people aren't voting, we have a crisis in democracy, and we have an opportunity to say what's going on and what's not going on. And also, when you have more people voting than not voting than are, the question of why vote came to mind, right? If you have just 14% of young people voting, why vote? And so we wanted to engage in an inquiry-based process with young people to really look at that. You know, what causes you to lean in and vote, what causes you to opt out and not vote, and are there ways that we could create some of those on-ramps to positive civic engagement?
And then, of course, you put young individuals in lead positions, such as Yesenia, who is a facilitator and the social media director, which is a whole nother animal. Say that again?
And a founding member of YVO.
And a founding member. That's lovely. That is wonderful. So Yesenia, let's talk about the events that are coming up and the role that you've been playing in making sure that you galvanize your generation.
Of course. As a founding member, I really wasn't into politics at all. So YVO really struck that for me. And just having the ability to go ahead and facilitate a group of kids that were like me, that were not really into politics. Some are, but a lot of them are not. And then having that space for them, having that space of civic engagement is important in order for them to see the value of voting and the value of of doing your civic duty when you can, even outside of the ballot box, because a lot of our youth can't vote right now, but what they can do is take other actions.
I love the next generation of conscious thinkers. Please continue to work hard to make a difference in the world. We're going to take a quick break. We'll be back with the best of Open BxRx 2020. Welcome back. One of the best parts of Open BxRx this year was our Open Artist Spotlight performances. It was so great to showcase different performers from their homes, and some even performed on their rooftops. So cool. All in all, we were able to bring people joy through music and dance. Let's take a look at some of the most memorable performances of 2020.
Christ and Taylor. I got a feature song singing for my grandma. You sing it too, but your grandma ain't my grandma. Mine's handmade, pan fried, sun dried, south side, and beat the devil by landslide. Praying with her hands tied. President of my fan club, Santa. Something told me I should bring my money. Slowly, take it in my body like it's holy. I've been waiting for you for the whole week. I've been praying for you, you're my Sunday.
In the Bronx where I was born. A car drives by off of Gun Hill Road and I can hear him playing reggaeton. Cause my bro is like its own damn city. My bro, even when it ain't pretty. My bro, it's got its own personality. Yeah. I said my bro is like its own little city. My bro, even when it ain't pretty. My bro, it's got its own personality. Yeah. Welcome to the boogie where we play down.
Y a lo lejos, ahí estás mientras duermes. Por allá se acercan nada más. Cuánto tengo que esperar. Todo lo que hago es aguantar y aguantar. Najubidiyata Say you want fresh water, I'll arrest the clouds to do. Till rain hits the ground to do. Your smile is my crown, baby. Your throne is my heart, baby. Come over and rule it. I want you to rule it, yes. I swear, wap koneki munweye jomwela. Son criminel bien habillé.
El miedo se manifiesta en completa oscuridad y amenaza tu verdad si es que tú lo alimentas. Céntrate en la belleza de unidad y conexión, porque es una bendición vivir esta dulce vida. Tenemos arte y risa para sanar nuestra aflicción. Nadie puede quitarme la alegría. Nadie puede quitarme la
Later, when I called mommy, she says she's still making trips to the post office. There's no line now, so her legs maze around the retractable belts quick and painless. Mira, que her back might even feel young enough for a walk in the park later, and she heard, but she can't be sure that it's true. So maybe I could use that goggle thing to look it up later, that there's a 3-month grace period for evictions now. So maybe Fulano gets to cook in their kitchen one more time. And
those were some amazing performances. Thank you, artists, for gifting us with your creative pivots. And why don't we hit that? That's our show today. Thanks to all our guests for coming through this 2020 year, and you, our viewers, for always tuning in throughout the years. If you missed any part of the show, you can check out the Recablecast tonight and 24 hours a day at bronxnet.tv. I'm Rhina Valentin, and from all of us here at Open, may the universe provide peace, prosperity, y amor. And I, of course, want to wish you all a happy new year, and bueno, here's to America's rebirth in 2021. Adios.